Good evening, my beloved patrons, and welcome to this very first Patreon-exclusive Mr. Rogues video. As patrons, you were all also able to vote on which comic I would be making a video on this month, and it seems like this one won Scarecrow Year 1. It is Scarecrow Year 1 that we'll be covering this month. I'm a bit surprised, honestly. I kind of assumed you would all vote for the three Jokers. So let's just get right into it, shall we? What is Scarecrow Year 1? Scarecrow Year 1 is a 2-issue miniseries published in 2005. It was written by Bruce Jones and penciled by Sean Murphy. In a nutshell, it's another retelling of the Scarecrow's origins. Kind of interesting that they made it in the first place, because exactly 10 years earlier, in 1995, we got another retelling of the Scarecrow's origins. The first post-crisis retelling of his origins. And I guess only 10 years later they simply decided to redo it again, even though there hadn't really been any kind of continuity reboot or anything like that in DC Comics. Considering the time it came out in 2005, I'm assuming they made it because of Batman Begins, which of course featured a Scarecrow in it. So, the story basically has 3 narratives. We follow Batman and Robin in present time, where they're investigating a series of murders where the victims have been scared to death. And we also follow Jonathan Crane, aka the Scarecrow, in present time, while he's committing these murders. And thirdly, we also get flashbacks back to Jonathan's childhood, which reveals how he became the man that he is. And this story constantly flip-flops between these 3 different narratives. I gotta come right out and say it, I don't find any of these 3 different narratives to be engaging whatsoever. Yeah, I am not a fan of Scarecrow Year 1. I read it once before, several years ago, and pretty much forgot all about it until I read it now again, which reminded me why I forgot all about it, because I'm soon gonna forget all about it again. It is an extremely forgettable comic, in my opinion, and I don't really understand why it has as many fans as it does, because I've seen a lot of people, including fans of my channel, say that this is their preferred Scarecrow origin. And I've also seen a lot of people in this community take inspiration from this comic and use it for their own versions of the Scarecrow. And I'm assuming they do that because they're a fan of the comic. I find the present day stuff with the Scarecrow as he's going after his victims to be incredibly dull. He just talks and talks and talks on and on and on, talks so much and explains everything, this and that, and he's not really saying anything interesting. Like, we go on for ages with one of the victims, the professor. Jonathan has him tied up and he's explaining this and that and going over this and just dumping all of this exposition on this professor and on us, the reader. I mean, it basically covers the entire first issue of this 2-issue miniseries, and these are 50-page comics, not 22-page comics. These are pretty long issues. And most of the first one is just spent with Jonathan in this room with this professor, just babbling on and on and on. Wow, some grand villain, some threatening, scary villain. He's just babbling with a tied-up professor in a room. And it all just ends with the professor dead in the chair, scared to death from the fear toxin. I mean, that's all it was about. He was gonna scare him to death with the fear toxin. Like, couldn't they have done that a bit quicker? And Jonathan's reasons for killing this professor, they're kind of weak. Not the best, not the worst, but I just don't really care. I don't care about Jonathan wanting to kill this professor. Basically, this professor didn't stand up for Jonathan when he was fired from the university. And, rightfully so, because he acted like a lunatic. And this professor had basically been Jonathan's mentor, and, he's pissed at him because he didn't stand up for him. But I mean, it would have been pointless anyway, because it would have been just him against all the other members of the faculty. So Even if this professor had stood up for Jonathan, he would have been kicked out anyway, so it's just so pointless, and I don't care. And some of these other people that Jonathan goes after, like his long-lost daddy, whom he's really never even met, I mean, I can understand him being disappointed in his father completely abandoning him, but it's just no real reason for going after him, hunting him down in Gotham City decades later and scaring him to death with this fear toxin. Like, I just don't care about these, the motivations that Scarecrow has. They're just not engaging. He's not sympathetic. I don't find him sympathetic, because I don't really agree at all with what he does. And he's not scary either. I don't find him to be scary or threatening either whatsoever. He's just this boring dude who just yaps on and on and on. And of course, his origin story, as we see through flashbacks. Yeah, I mean... I know a lot of people love this origin for some reason, but I just don't care for it at all. So we basically had 3 different origin stories for the Scarecrow in the comics. We have the first one from 1995, where he was a bullied geek in school. Basically that was it. He was a bullied geek, and they taunted him because he sort of looked like a scarecrow, and that's why he becomes the Scarecrow. It's kind of goofy and weak, but Then we have the New 52 one, where he's tortured by his insane father, who is a scientist working for the CIA and creating the fear toxin, essentially, and using his son as the guinea pig. Now that's a version that I really like, but of course not everybody likes it, but me personally, I love that one. And then we have this one from 2005. And in this one, he is essentially born into an insane family in the South in Georgia. A family that used to be rich and influential, but are now poor, and they still live in their old run-down mansion. This family also happens to be fanatically religious, and Jonathan is born out of wedlock. He's a bastard. His mother apparently had some kind of an affair with some shady guy. And of course the rest of the family is greatly ashamed of this, and they consider it a big sin. And his grandmother suggests that they just kill him right after he's born, which I find to be incredibly over the top. But what happens next is, I suppose, even more over the top, because his great-grandmother doesn't do this. Instead, she decides to raise Jonathan in secret, just so that she can torture him. She saves him from death, just so that she can torment him for years, for some reason. I think that Jonathan's family are done incredibly poorly in this comic. They are written so over the top and completely unbelievable. I think that his insane father worked a lot better in the New 52 version. He came off as scarier too, while in this one his insane great-grandmother just comes off as ridiculous. They just handled it a lot better in the New 52 version. Like, his great-grandmother goes to such extreme lengths to just torture the boy. For example, she secretly covers his clothes in animal blood, just so that flocks of crows will attack him. For some reason. I mean, at least in the New 52, his insane father had an actual reason. He was trying to create this drug for the CIA. What are great-granny's reasons? Okay, she hates him because he was born out of wedlock and she's a fanatical Christian. Okay, I get that. But these extreme things she does, it's just too much. It's too much. It's ridiculous. I mean, I don't know if people have actually done this in real life. Maybe they have. But still, in this story, it's just too ridiculous. I just can't take it seriously whatsoever, and I don't really understand what's going on in the first place. Why are people doing the things they're doing? None of these characters are really engaging or compelling in any way, and you don't really understand them. Like, why are they doing what they're doing? You don't understand it and you don't care. At least that's how it is for me. So yeah, it's a story that completely fails for me, and I don't find any of the parts with Batman and Robin investigating these crimes to be very interesting either. And I don't like the artwork whatsoever. It's a very cartoony style and it just doesn't fit this story at all. This story is trying to be at least dark and serious. And then you have this artwork that looks like it's from some kind of cartoon show for kids. It's like, what were they thinking, putting this artist on this book? It's a complete mismatch and it just makes it all worse. If this comic had very dark, scary looking artwork, it maybe would have worked better for me. If this comic looked like some kind of crazy horror story, I might have been able to buy all this silly stuff and all these over-the-top things a bit better. But as it is, it's just a big old no. Just pass on this one. I even like the 1995 version of his origin better. At least that one's kind of memorable because of how goofy it is. But this one is just so dull, and it just doesn't engage me whatsoever, and it looks terrible. And yeah, it's just a no for me, and it always has been, and I'll never understand why it has so many fans. I mean, I guess I'm glad it's a lot of people out there can find something good with this story and get some joy and entertainment out of it, but it just doesn't work for me personally at all. Yeah, I guess that's it. Those are my thoughts, my review of Scarecrow Year 1 from 2005. Next month we'll of course do the whole poll thing again, and you'll again get to vote on which comic I'll review. I'll have the 3 other options still there, plus a new one. And we'll see which one we get next. Of course, thank you for becoming a patron of mine. I really appreciate it. And as always, remember, Arkham Asylum awaits you in the next video.